So good morning, everyone out in internet land and across the world. This is Yvonne DeVita coming to you from downtown sunny Binghamton, where it's not sunny, and you know that because it's hardly ever sunny in Binghamton. Kind of cloudy and rainy today, but they're promising sun later on the weekend. So that's good news for the dog, although I keep trying to tell her I'm not in charge of the weather and she doesn't believe me. You're listening to Smart Conversations, and this morning my guest is Andrea Pass, and she's a public relations person, but she's got a little twist to what she does. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Yvonne. Good to see you.
Let me tell people about you. And Andrea, this is some of all of it's impressive, but I really was reading over your bio, and I was thinking, I need to get to know her better. She's really smart. So when it comes to keeping business relevant with press coverage, Andrea Pass has created and implemented public relations campaigns in a wide range of categories, including consumer products, lifestyle, business to business, education, health, wellness, fitness, beauty, food, authors, nonprofits, and more. Andrea Pass Public Relations at AndreaPassPR.com has an expertise in national, regional, local media relations outreach, which is really so important, folks. I mean, that local media outreach is really important. Her strength in relationships, coupled with her knowledge of the ever-growing media-based results in securing top-tier targeted media placements to increase brand awareness, reputation management, think about that for a minute, and sales for established businesses and growing entrepreneurs alike. Andrea serves on the board of directors of the nonprofit United Inventors Association. Wow. Workshop council chair for the Performance Driven Marketing Institute and vice president membership of the New Jersey Association of Women Business Owners. She has created the webinar series Resonate to Revenue. Pass is also the founder of Access Success Networking. And I just think you're an awfully busy lady. My goodness, tell us a little bit about, we're going to talk about PR, folks. We're going to talk about lots of PR, but you know, you're doing a whole lot there at the bottom. I was reading all these things you belong to. How do you manage to fit that into your life?
Ask a busy woman.
Yeah.
I just find that a busy woman can always add something to her plate. And it's always been that way. If something interests me, sure, I'll dive right in. I'll be involved. I'll do this, I'll do that. And I think that having that great life-work balance, and I put life first, and I think that's something that we've learned over the last few years is putting life first. But I love what I do, and you know, I'm filled with all of these cliches, but it's true. If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, and I love what I do. So if I could bring PR and work on public relations with organizations and educating entrepreneurs and authors alike, then I love doing it. So I stay busy, but yes, Yvonne, I do find time for a vacation.
Yes, and I know you just had a wedding in your family, and how exciting is that? Weddings were like put on hold for such a long time, but that must have been just delightful.
It was a long time coming. My daughter was supposed to get married March of 2020, paid in full, and later that afternoon was the day the whole world shut down. So she already had the marriage license, and they got married in our backyard. So they've been married for 2 years, 5 postponements. This was number 6, and they finally had their big reception. They renewed their vows, and they were glowing and dancing up a storm, as were we. And so nothing like celebrating your 2-year wedding anniversary with finally having your wedding. But
yes, finally,
you know,
the dancing and the being able to share that with all the people that are so important to you. So, you know, that leads me to the fact that when my authors come to me, one of the things I tell them is, hey, you know, we can write this book and it will be wonderful. It will look wonderful and get a great cover and we'll get it published. But you, guess what, author? You have to market that book. You have to tell people, because it doesn't work when you say if you build it, they will come. They don't come, right, Andrea?
And you've hit the nail on the head, because it's great if you have a book and you can say you wrote a book, but you want more than your family to purchase that book. And you want that book to grow. And of course, most people don't get wealthy writing a book, but that book could benefit your business and that book could grow so much for you, but you have to market it. I actually had a call yesterday with a gentleman who has now written his second novel, and he published via Ingram, Amazon. And he said, yeah, I guess no one's reading it. I said, who knows about it? You have to market. And public relations is an important element of the marketing mix, because in public relations, we are securing earned media coverage. Yes. We are securing coverage in print, broadcast, online, so that you stay relevant and you can reuse this on your social media over and over again, because it doesn't matter if the interview airs today, it's evergreen content. You can rerun it again, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 months, 3 months, whatever it is, because the average reader is not absorbing content based on a date. They're absorbing content based on information. So authors really need to take the time and the budget to have public relations in their marketing mix, because publishing houses are not spending the money, and self-published authors want their book to be read. So whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you gotta make sure the public knows about it.
And I like that. I love what you said. And if we sit here and think about it a minute, the word public should be in everyone's head, woo, because that's the whole point, is you want to get this in front of the public. Now, one of the things that I find comical with people on a general basis is how when I ask them who this is for, who's the audience for this book, and they always like to say, well, everybody. Andrea, that's not the right answer, is it?
No, I mean, not everybody likes every kind of genre. I happen to love historical fiction. And I'm really not much into suspense. So the average reader might try, and someone had bought me a novel last year for my birthday that was really suspense and intense, and my book club was reading it, so I read it. I was so exhausted at the end of this novel. It was written beautifully, but I said, you know what? It's just not my genre. So no, not every person in the world is going to read your book. And if it's fiction, there's certain categories. There are people that love romance. There's people that love thrillers. Then there's nonfiction, people who love memoirs or educational books or business to-do books. So you've got to reach the right audience at the right place in order to increase that awareness and drive those sales.
So let's talk about the right place, because that's really, really important. We can identify the audience, but then we have to figure out, well, where do they hang out so we can tell them about the book? Talk about place.
The category of place in public relations is very, very far-flung, because you don't know if the person listening to that podcast, it's going to resonate with them, or reading that article, or seeing that book featured on TV, or what have you. So place can be a lot more far-flung than you think. Not everyone is New York Times bestseller material. And New York Times bestseller list is made of people who are publishing their books through the top tier publishing houses. They're not for self-published books. So you have to remember,
there are some that make it.
Yes,
there are some,
very few, but it's
put
really,
a lot of effort into it.
Exactly, it's very, very few. But it's important to understand that doing interviews about your book and your writing process, being featured on websites that feature authors and new books, and consumer press in general in your hometown, where you might have gone to go to college, where you might be speaking at a trade show or what have you. All of these things contribute, because think of it, every single media outlet is a touch point, and you're reaching one and one and one. And that's where it's important. And I tell a story of a client of mine who has a consumer product. And the consumer product was featured the same week on the Huffington Post and on a mom blog. So the Huffington Post had about, at the time, 1.5 million unique views a month. The mom blog had about 900. Okay. The mom blog sold 25 of that product that day, and the Huffington Post sold 0.
Oh, what an awesome story.
But you don't know.
No.
And that's the thing. You don't know who's absorbing what and where they're absorbing it. So you've got to be in it to win it. Gosh, I'm corny today. I'm with the corny comments today.
No, I love it. I love it. Be in
but
it
it's
to win it.
it's the truth that if you're not out there and you're not talking about your book and you're not staying relevant and you're not then reposting all of this press on your social media and tagging the media outlet,
right,
and engaging on social media with those media outlets on their pages, then you're missing opportunities.
Yes.
And every missed opportunity is a missed sale of your book, or missed opportunity for you to have a speaking engagement or enter an awards competition. So don't miss those opportunities. Every author should have public relations in their marketing mix.
Right. And we talked earlier about press releases. And I'm not going to say press releases are bad or anything. They have their place, I'm sure. But when I hear an author, and I've heard several recently, talk about how they worked with this publishing company, and the publishing company sent out a press release. And I'm like, and what happened? Did lots of people buy your book, or did lots of people call you up and want to interview you? Well, no, I don't think anything happened. Tell us about that.
Press releases are antiquated. Period. End of sentence. And it's important that when it comes to getting the word out, you have an effective public relations professional or team, or you're working with Andrea Pass Public Relations. And I am doing one-on-one media outreach. I'm not blasting a press release and throwing spaghetti and see what sticks on the wall. I'm doing the research to see, is this the right place? Can we reach someone? I have long-term contacts.
And who's the right person?
Exactly. And whereas for years, there were, once a week, daily newspapers reviewed books. It doesn't happen anymore. Staffs of media outlets have been cut to the core. Most is being written by freelance writers.
Wow.
And freelance producers.
Wow.
And we have this increased world of homegrown journalists that may not have studied journalism in college, but now they have a podcast, or they have a blog, or a newsletter, or a YouTube. And so we're reaching those. I'm not a big believer in paying influencers. You can certainly pay for things, but it's a one and done. So you'll pay a few hundred or a few thousand here for one post on Instagram, and it may not go anywhere. So my recommendation is put your money into a public relations campaign and save a little for some, not a lot, pay-to-play editorial opportunities. Unfortunately, some media outlets want you to pay to be featured for an interview. I'm not a fan of it, but if you've never done an interview on TV, your first one, if you do a pay-to-play, you control the content. So we're writing the script, and so that you can be prepared and not be nervous when you're going on camera for the first time. But public relations is all about keeping you relevant and talking about your book and talking about topics related to your book. So be there.
Tell me, one of the things that we also talked about is when you work with, certainly with Andrea Pass, you know people. This is the big thing to me, is when I was a freelance writer, okay, so we were taught, if you want to pitch something to Woman's Day magazine, you better look at the masthead and find the editor that handles whatever it is you're writing, a story, an article, whatever. And so, and you better be familiar with the magazine. Well, if you hire Andrea Pass, she already knows that, right?
Exactly. And I just have to go back a second. It's just funny that you mentioned Woman's Day magazine. That was my first job out of college. Woman's Day was owned by CBS at the time, and I was going to be the next Dan Rather. So after college, I went in my little blue suit with my little blue pumps and my little brown briefcase with my initials engraved in it that my parents bought me. And I went to CBS, and there was a freeze in the broadcast area. So I was hired by Woman's Day magazine, and I was doing advertising, trafficking, and layout for Woman's Day magazine till I could get into the CBS radio division doing PR. So, so it's funny that you said Woman's Day, which is near and dear to my heart. But yes, I call myself a PI in PR. I'm a private investigator. So either I know these editors and writers, or I know how to find them.
Mhm.
And will I know everyone? Can I rattle off names to you right now? That's not necessary. I know how to find them. I know how to effectively communicate with them the way they want to be communicated with. I know how not to bombard them. Unfortunately, so many PR people send these long emails with a zillion attachments.
Mm.
No one wants them. Don't send attachments. Don't send me an 11 megabyte picture of your book jacket. No one's opening that. And so I know how to pitch, when to pitch. I know that come June 1, that's when I start holiday gift guides.
See?
Long lead magazines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, this is a really, really important thing to understand. Not just that you pitch certain things at certain times, 6 months in advance, generally. There are some I've heard that do 3 months, and I'm like, that's interesting. I've always done 6 months in advance. You have to start the Christmas season in June. And it's funny, as a little aside, I tease people all the time when June 1st comes. I'm like, are you doing your Christmas shopping yet? Because it's going to be here tomorrow. But the thing that impresses me is also that knowing how to reach out and what to say, because authors, I am not a PR person, folks. Okay, I don't do your PR. Could I write a press release? Probably. Would it do you any good? Probably not. Put it on your website, somebody might see it. But the point being here, because we are all so busy, and the author, especially authors I work with, most of them are nonfiction, but I do have a fiction author, they're busy too. So who has time to actually do, because if you don't do this, folks, if you don't hire someone like Andrea Pass and you're doing it yourself, you are putting yourself 6 months to a year to 2 years behind someone who is working with Andrea.
Exactly. And when you have a team behind you, you're bigger.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's perception is reality. Another one of my favorite quotes, because if I'm out there calling, hi, this is Andrea from Andrea Pass Public Relations. I wanted to tell you about XYZ book by John Doe. Then, oh, yeah, as a PR person,
Yeah.
suddenly that makes you bigger.
Mhm.
And it's all that perception, but I know how to do it, and I know how to word it, and I know the timing that works out well. And I had someone call me up about a year or so ago whose book was coming out a week later. It was a fiction book. And she said to me, well, my book's coming out in a week, but I want to be in People magazine, and that's all I want to be in. And I said, well, you're self-published, number one, and number two, you would have needed 90 days or more before publication date to reach People magazine. That's not true. I said, yes, that's true. Person argued with me a little bit. I said, you know what, I'm not up for an argument if she knows better. And I spoke to her agent who had connected us right after that. I said, we will not be working together.
Mhm.
And I keep Googling her all these months later. Her book never got published. She never got any press because she knew better.
Yeah.
And the same way that, I wouldn't, we were just discussing this before, I wouldn't do my own hair.
Mhm.
I go to a professional to have my hair done.
Yeah.
It's important that you add people to your team who are professionals. I don't do my own accounting.
Mhm.
I'm lousy at numbers. I have my accountant handle my accounting because my accountant is trained
Yes.
in numbers.
Yes.
And so bring in a team, but realize that if you're going to make it, and if you're going to get out there and increase awareness, you need to have a budget to do so.
So here's a really important thing that needs to be brought up. A lot of authors today, I shouldn't say a lot, every single author I talk to wants to be an Amazon bestseller. And there are ways to make that happen. It's hard and it's not hard. But after you make that happen, then what, folks? Then what? You sit back on your laurels. Now I've got this Amazon bestseller status. No, right, Andrea, there's still work to be done.
It doesn't end there. A book, I mean, the book I just read for my book club, a memoir that we just read, it came out in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that there aren't audiences years later for your book. And especially when you have a nonfiction book, you have constant audiences that need the information that could be about business or health and wellness or any category under the sun. But a nonfiction book lasts even longer. So you have to be out there. Don't just sit back, because what are you writing a book for? Are you writing a book because you have nothing else to do and you feel like writing a book? Or you're writing a book because it was in your heart and in your spirit and in your gut that this is going to help you get your name out there to help grow your business. And in nonfiction, that's often the reason, to help grow your business and your following, because you're sharing your expertise.
Absolutely. And there's so many other things that can happen with the book, but not if you don't get it in front of the audience. So one of the audiences, let me ask you this, your guidance will be so helpful. One of the audiences my authors are starting to ask me about is, how do you get into the college speaking circuit?
Whereas I'm not an expert at speaking circuits, the thing is these days, very few places are paying for speakers. So get it in your mindset that they're not necessarily going to pay you, but they will allow you to sell books.
Yes.
And it's really reaching the individuals that book events at those colleges and universities and other activities. I run a networking group, as you had mentioned, Access Success Networking. And I frequently bring in authors on my virtual events to speak for a few minutes about a business topic. And then I make sure that all of the attendees and people I've reached out to who couldn't attend, I forward them the links of that book so that they could purchase the book. And a lot of people get back to me and said, yes, I ended up purchasing so-and-so's book because that person spoke at our group. So colleges are important depending on the topic, but also recognize other groups can lead to the they told two friends and so on approach. And I had an author at one of my networking events, and someone reached out to me later and said, would you mind if I get him to speak at my networking event? Hey, the more the merrier. And so he's now speaking at another event virtually, and that could be more books sold or more awareness for a business. So colleges are important, but make sure you branch out and you have the time and you have a set presentation that's tight. Know your audience. Make sure it doesn't go on too long, because honestly, we all start to lose interest. The average person has a 20-minute attention span, if that, and we are overwhelmed with content. And so whereas people are listening to us right now and they're listening to me talk about Andrea Pass public relations, it's very possible that you are jogging or you're watching TV or you're working on something and you have this on in the background while you're working on a document for a client. So it's really important that you recognize that you should keep your talk tight, concise, and to the point.
Yeah, and I really love what you said about understanding, especially if you're starting out and going into something like networking events in college circuit or wherever, you're not going to get paid. Don't try to start out of the block saying that you should get paid. You work your way up to that, to a point where after a few years, you may be so popular, you've done so well because of all these things we're talking about, that you now can get paid speaking gigs. But a lot of what authors really should be doing today are podcasts. What do you recommend as far as finding podcasts?
I am a huge fan of podcasts, and I have created the most amazing relationships with podcasters all across the country.
Awesome.
Because the benefit of being a guest on a podcast is you have a long form format. So other interviews might be 3 minutes max. You certainly have that 20, 30, 40, 60 minutes to tell a story. But if you are going to be a guest on a podcast, listen to the podcast first. Familiarize yourself with the style. And remember, when you're talking about your book, you must say the name of your book. And those of you who've been listening since the beginning of the dialogue between Yvonne and I have heard me refer to myself as Andrea Pass Public Relations, because you need to say your business name. And in this case, the name of your book instead of, well, in my book, chapter 3 in my book, I cover this in my book. Well, what's your book about? Because of the fact that people are tuning in and out. So you want to say the name of your book a number of times throughout the course of a podcast interview. And you want to make sure that the podcaster has all of your contact information, your website, your social media to place the interview and tag you. And then you, in turn, want to place that on your social media and tag the podcaster. I had a podcaster just yesterday. I have an author, a autistic young boy who's in high school who wrote a young adult novel. And he had done an interview on this podcast all about gratitude, because he's really grateful that he's embraced his autism. And the host reached out to me yesterday and said, you know what? I'd like to have him back.
Wow.
He was so popular. So now we're booking that interview again. So make sure that you're doing podcasts, but work with a professional PR person who knows which are the right ones, which is going to reach an audience, and which you need to do your work. So if you don't have a social media person, make sure that you have social media pages that you are posting on consistently and not posting pictures of what you had for dinner last night.
That's so funny. Okay, you don't want me to post what I made? Oh, Andrea. Oh.
If you're a cookbook author, go right ahead.
And the other thing is, I recommend that they have an author page, an author site, an author name, and then they can have their personal thing where they put what they cooked for dinner, right?
Exactly.
You've got to be able to separate them, because this is the business and this is the personal. And yes, they intertwine, and yes, we all bring them together at certain times, but when you're doing public relations and reaching out and trying to get in front of people, this is your business. This is how. So if people were to work with you, I know we talked a little bit about this, well, way back then, a couple weeks ago, before the wedding. Do you actually help them, especially if they're first-time authors? Because some of my authors are even afraid to go on a podcast. They're like, what do I say? How do I do it? So I'm like trying to teach them, but I'm not the teacher they should be working with.
I definitely do media training with my clients so they're prepared to be a guest on a podcast or any kind of an interview that they might be doing. That's really important, to be able to stay focused and to bring it back to your topic, which is your book. And so I work with authors, and quite honestly, if you're doing an interview that's via Zoom or another platform on your computer, you can have notes written around the place. It's okay if you want to make sure you don't forget something, that you've taped it to your computer or you have it sitting next to you. And that's the beauty. When you're in a TV studio and you're going live, you can't have notes.
Right.
But these days, because of the technology, you're at home or in your office, and so therefore you can have notes and you can bring it back. And it's really important that you practice, and you can practice on your computer, put on Zoom or whatever and watch yourself and record yourself, or you can practice in an old-fashioned mirror and make eye contact with yourself and practice talking about a topic and keeping it tight. Listen back when you're done with an interview. I oftentimes listen back and I give some pointers to my clients so that they know what to do. You're talking too fast. You're talking too slow. You're pausing too much. You're saying my book instead of the name of the book.
Right.
You're going off on a tangent, and therefore it wasn't until part 2 of the interview that you even talked about your book. So it's important that you remember, no matter what we're talking about, we're going to bring it back to you as an author, because you don't know who's going to tune out midway through a podcast because they have something else, they have a meeting to go to, or they're going to plan on finishing it later and they don't have a chance to. So make sure up top you are talking about you, your book, what it's about, where you can get it, and then you'll repeat that again later in a conversation.
Yeah, I like that. The whole concept of repeating people. I had a gal that was years ago going to work with me on my blog, and we wanted to start creating courses. And we told her, you've got to say things more than once. You can't just start out introducing us and say it, and then there you go at the end, say, okay, I'm done. We need you to repeat this. And she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't do it, so we couldn't work with her. We said, well, we can't work with you because this. She said, I hate it when I read something and somebody says something over and over. And I said, well, you're one of a million people then, because people need that repetition. And like you say, someone may be coming in late or leaving and coming back. So we have to know those things, and repeating things is not a bad thing.
Exactly. And it's not to the point that you're overdoing it.
Right.
You have to feel what's right in the course of a conversation in what you're repeating, but not every single thing about your book is important for that interview. And you might have 10 tips. Cover 3 of them.
Right.
Get them interested so they buy the book to find out the other tips you're offering.
Right.
So you don't have to give it all away.
Yeah.
You can give this taste of what your topic is and how it pertains to your audience. And that's what's really important when you're doing an interview. And I work with my clients on that. I had a client who wrote about 25 different books.
Wow.
And he wouldn't let me share any of his tips with the press. He says, I just want to do interviews. I want them to interview me. I said, but I have to at least tell them what you talk about and offer some tips. And after a while, he wouldn't let, and I was pulling things from his book. He said, no, they have to buy the book.
Oh, wow.
And so we couldn't work together for very long because I had reporters asking me for some of the information and I couldn't provide it. And he didn't want to give any more.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Here's the key, folks, and I tell my authors this too. You can write that entire book on your blog and people will still buy it, because when you come to me and we work on the book to make it a published product, we're going to add content and we're going to add stories and we're going to make it even better. So all the content on your blog is wonderful. It's an introduction to your book. Oh, now I need to get the book and read it because there's so much more in the book. So Andrea, we're at the end of our time, and this has really, really been fabulous because I don't think authors think of public relations when they think of their marketing. So this is really important. I want to make sure all my authors and anybody out there who's doing a book, you don't have to be working with me. I want people, whether they're writing a book or whether they're in business, or, if you want to get noticed today, you need to have someone like Andrea Pass, public relations. You need it because you don't know how to get noticed. All these overnight celebrities were not overnight celebrities. Nobody ever became famous overnight. It took them years and years and years, and they went through, trying to do it on their own, and then finally probably hiring someone like Andrea. So you don't have to do that. Don't waste all that time. Right, Andrea? It's a waste of time to try. I mean, we're also smart. Oh, I know how to post on LinkedIn. I know how to post on Twitter. I'm just going to put my book there and I'm going to tag it and I'm going to hashtag it and the whole world's going to see it. And that is not true.
Exactly. And the best bet is to connect with me before your book is published.
There you go.
That's important. So whether we start a month before the book is published or a few months before the book is published, we still have content to share. Yes. Because oftentimes you do an interview and it doesn't run immediately.
Yes.
So I have a client that we did the pre-interview last week. The interview is being recorded next week and it'll probably run in about 2 months.
Yeah.
So there's this lag from interviews and what have you. So get started today. Yeah. So you will have that content. Make sure, like you said, have author pages so you can post this and share this. And make sure you take great pictures. I need your headshot. I need a book jacket. I'd even like you holding the book.
Yes.
So I need a few great pictures. What do I need to start? You need to have a website and social media pages, great images. I need a copy of the book because I have to read it. Some tips that we're going
Do
to
you
pull from
read
the
the
book.
books?
Oh, I read every client book. I won't do
Awesome.
PR unless I'm reading my clients.
You are just like me. And I've got a couple authors who said, wow, you're going to actually read the book. I'm like, how can I work with you on the book that has already been published that you want me to redo because it was so poorly done? How can I do that if I don't read the book?
Yeah, I think, do you have time for one funny story?
Sure.
When I was a baby PR person, I was representing an attorney who wrote a book on capital gains taxes. This was bigger than the dictionary. And I know nothing about capital gains taxes. So if you out there are writing a book about capital gains taxes, I am not your PR person. So I get this book and I try to read 1 or 2 pages, and it was as if I was reading some foreign language. I didn't get it. But I was able to get some pointers from the client. I did not read this book. I had her everywhere. And I said to the press, I can't answer the questions about capital gains taxes, but she can. And so now I would not work with that category. But with the categories I work with, I read the book because I like to read a hard copy because I flag pages, I write notes, I put stickies.
Yes.
There are things that are important. So I have someone who has a book coming out in a few months, and he sent me the e-version. And I said, no, this doesn't work. He says, can I just print it out on paper and send it to you? I said, yes, 100%. And I've had clients do that, send me just copied paper, as long as I can read it and write notes.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So it's important. And you, as the author, need to have copies that you are going to send out to the press when I tell you to.
Yes.
Many
Yes,
of my
important. Yeah.
Yes, many of my clients who are authors, they'll actually order the book on Amazon to have it shipped to the reviewer or the press person, because that also increases your numbers on Amazon. But I have others who will order an extra few, 100, 200 extra books to have at their home. They ship it out. So I don't need a lot to get started. So start today, and feel free to reach out to me at AndreaPassPR.com. I have an appointments tab, and please make note that you learned about me through Yvonne. And so we can talk about your book and PR, and make sure you have, a budget. I've had authors come to me and say, but this is a labor of love. Can you do this pro bono? Sorry, I run a business. I don't do author pro bono work.
That's like people asking me to just take my fee out of the royalties. Since most average authors sell 280 books, I don't think that's going to work. But they'll sell a lot more if they work with you. I can tell you that. And folks, we're gonna finish up here, but let's just recap a little bit. I mean, Andrea Pass, public relations. You need to work with someone like her, and I recommend Andrea because she knows how to do the stuff. Now we know she's going to read your book. How much more valuable is that? Because she's going to know what she's talking about. It isn't going to be someone who just skimmed the about section of the book to find out who you were. This is something you need to do because in order to get in front of that audience, you need to get in front of the people where the audience hangs out, and Andrea can help you figure that out and who to talk to. So this has really been fabulous, Andrea, and I think that if we can't impress upon people the importance, business and authors alike, the necessity of putting that in your budget, and you know, authors, I tell you have to have a budget because I don't come free either. If we can't impress upon them, well, then I basically just feel sorry for them.
Well, I hope we have an opportunity to work together with some of your authors, and for other authors, please feel free to reach out to me, because start today and let's get PR for you beginning tomorrow.
Yes, let's start today, folks. Start today. Get in front of the right people with Andrea Pass Public Relations. Andrea, we're going to sign off now. And thank you for being on Smart Conversations. This has really, really been absolutely fabulous and so informative, so informative.
Thank you so much for having me.